Hello, welcome back to the second segment of tutorial on Python. We were able to look at the concept of computer, the definition of computer, two critical parts of computer, hardware and software. We were able to also mention that a computer is a calculator, or can be defined as a calculator. We mentioned a critical part of the computer with respect to the subject matter, which has to do with programming. We mentioned the central processing unit, the CPU for short, or the microprocessor as the brain of the computer. We also looked at the concept of the fundamentals aspect of programming languages with respect to data types, the essence of data types and the type of data types and with respect to the size in memory and to enable the system to know the kind of data that it will be manipulating with respect to the data type. We're also able to look at syntax, the rules that governs the programming language. If you want to make a sentence or a statement rather in that programming language, what is the rule? What do you need to follow? The syntax that is required to make a valid statement in that programming language. We also looked at identifiers, how to name an identifier in Python programming language. You're not supposed to use a special character or symbol like the ampersand sign, the @ sign, the percentage sign, the comma, and we're also able to look at a user or a programmer rather not taking note of reserved words in Python like continue, none, del, def. These are reserved words, print, and so on and so forth. These are reserved words that cannot be used as an identifier or a variable name in your programming in Python because they have a specific meaning to the Python interpreter. Okay, so this part of the lesson or tutorial will be looking at how to output something or output text on the computer monitor. Okay, one of the critical things that you also need to know or yearn to know when you approach a new programming language is for you to know how to output a result on the computer monitor in that particular programming language, because every programming language has a different way of outputting an information, and it's very key. And in Python, for you to be able to output any information on the monitor, there is a function that you need to use, or there is a statement that you need to use to be able to output whatever information or whatever result as a means of your program evaluation, and it's displayed on the monitor. Okay, so in the other first tutorial we created a variable name. We created a variable name or an identifier as num1, and we assigned a value 5 to it. Okay, we also created another variable or assign an identifier num2. Okay, and we gave that we assigned a value to that variable num2, and you discover that it's very critical as a programmer that when you are creating a variable or an identifier in your program, the value that the identifier will be holding, it's critical that you give a name that will closely match or tell the meaning of whatever you are assigning to that variable or that identifier. It's key so that you can keep track, because some applications can span tens of thousands of programming statement lines. Like we see here, we have 1, we see 2, 3, and 4. So you could write an application that will span up to close to 1 million, even more than 1 million lines of code. So it's good you keep track of your variable or identifier naming, naming as it were. Now I call this num1. Okay, num, which I derive from number. Okay, num1 is telling me that okay, it's going to hold a value which it's number. So, and I'm assigning a value 5, an integer, to num1. As we can see here, I'm assigning value 5 to num1. Okay, then I set num2, which is also of data type float. Now I'm assigning 4.09, okay, to num2. They are numbers. Okay, now I'm going to create another variable or identifier that is going to hold string. These are the 3 key data types we may be working with. Okay, so I'll call that name 1. Okay, and I'm going to assign now in terms of the data type string, what is required of you, the syntax of creating a string of a data type string is this. It's going to okay, so the syntax in creating a string variable or identifier is the identifier name, then you assign the string in quotes. For instance, Martin. So I have 2 flavors here. There are 2 ways you can do this. Name 2 is assigned. You can use either this or you use double quotes. It's either you use single quotes or you use double quotes. Okay, it's still valid. Okay, so immediately the Python interpreter encounters this name, this string of letters or characters, name, Martin, in quotes. The Python interpreter has the ability to know that okay, the identifier or variable name 1 is of type string. Okay, same thing as name 2 because of this quote here. So it is critical for you to note that if you want to manipulate string, you have to put them in quotes. Okay, if you don't put it in quotes, the interpreter will generate an error. Okay, you see this red dot here? Okay, it doesn't know this, so it doesn't exist in this database. So you have to introduce the single quote. Okay, this is a valid statement. This is a valid string assignment statement to identifier or variable of type what? String. Okay, so having done this, we want to display the whole of this on the we want to output the whole of this, either one after the other or all together, as the case may be. So the way you output that statement is simply introducing this function. This print bracket open bracket close is an inbuilt function in Python. So what we need to do, the syntax here is print open brackets, then you type the variable name or variable or identifier that you want to output on the screen. You go to this play button here, run file, or you press F5 on your computer. It's going to run and display. Now what do we have here on the right corner part of this screen here? We're seeing what? 5. Okay, so this print function takes in one argument. Okay, and the argument that it takes in here is what? num1. Now don't forget that num1 is a memory location. Okay, num1 is what? A memory location. It's like a cup holder. Okay, see num1 here. Okay, this is exactly what happens. By the time you say num1 is assigned 5, you're telling the processor that when it encounters num, it should display. You're telling the print function there, you're telling the print function that it should go to the variable, to the memory location that is bearing the name num1 and display the content. The content is 5. That is what this print statement is saying here. That's what this print statement is saying, is that go to the memory location that has the name num1 and display its content. Okay, that's what this print statement, this output statement is saying. Okay, now the print output function can have can have multiple arguments. Okay, now num1 is an argument with respect to functions. Okay, so you can as well do the say num2, you save and press F5. Okay, so what do we have there? We have what? 5 and 4.0 what? 9. Now it's the same thing here, saying num2 is assigned 4.09. now your 4.09 at runtime, what happens is that 4.09 at runtime will be 5 will be assigned to the content of num1, then 4.09 will be assigned to the content of what? num2. Okay, when we say assign, we simply means that 5 will be put in that memory location that is referenced by the name num1, then 4.09 will also be put in that memory location that is referenced by the identifier or variable num2. So when you want to output this value 5 and you want to output the content of num2, which is 4.09, all you need to do is reference that memory location with by the variable name or the identifier. Okay, and for you to, when you reference it as it is here, num1, you're simply telling the print function that go to the memory location that you reserved, okay, with the name, or that you referenced with the name num1, and print its content, display its content on the screen. Go to the memory location that you referenced with the name num2 and display its what content. So we can also increase this to name 1 and name 2. Okay, I'll change this one to my second name, my last name rather, my surname. Okay, we save and we press F5. Okay, so what do we have here? If we look at this side of our screen, we have what, 5, which is referenced by num1. We have 4.09, which is referenced by num2. Then we have Martin displayed. Okay, so now you see that the string Martin is printed without the single quote. Also, the string Izu is printed with what? Without the double what? Quote. Okay, so if it's critical for you to know that if you want to display a string and you want to perhaps display, if you have a double quote as it were, you want to manipulate it to display on the screen. Okay, all you need to do here is perhaps you will introduce the double quotes as it were. Then okay, you now see that the quotes, the single quote here now is taken as what? A normal, is printed alongside. So this outer quote now is acting as the syntax, while the inner one here is regarded as part of the string character or the name what? Martin. This is critical for you to understand. The inner quote here, single inner quote, is part of this string Martin. Okay, so the syntax still remains, which is this double what? Quotation. So in case you encounter something like this, you should be able to interpret or know the reason why you have this kind of result, because there are cases where you would want to display or format your output in this manner. So I say let that out before we miss that as well. So we've been able to output the result or output something on our screen down there. Okay, so we can also do something like this. We can say we can add this. We can add a string. We can say num1, num2, you are welcome. Martin Izu. Okay, let me see, I have a double comma there. Okay, so we now see that I've added a text, and that string that I added is in quotes. okay, single quote, and it will fly. You could also, you could now see that we have 5, which is the content of num1, 4.0, which is the content of num2, then this string characters here, which is you are welcome, Martin Izu. Okay, or you can, now you can do this, okay, or you can put the text in quotes here as an argument, is still acceptable, or you can assign it to a string identifier or variable data type, okay, like we did here. So we have two ways of displaying string. It's either we do it this way or we put it in this form. Okay, I'll put in using the print output statement. So this is key, how to display result or display a text on the screen, which is the output statement. It's key in every programming language. So if we follow the sequence, you learn the data type, you learn the syntax, okay, you learn how to create identifier, you learn how you learn the key reserved words, know the key reserved words so that you don't use them in your identifier as part of your identifier. Then you also learn how to output an information or a result on the screen, or as the case may be. The next, now permit me to delve in a little bit here on this print statement. Okay, now this comma you're seeing here is telling the print function that immediately it displays the content of num1, it shouldn't go to the next line. It should go to the next column. Okay, now this is column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, 5. The computer screen is divided into column and rows. Okay, it's divided into column and rows. Okay, so what this comma is simply saying is that when you print the content of num1, leave a space, leave a column, and print on that same row, okay, and print num2. Leave a column again and print this text that is in quote here, you are welcome, you are welcome. Leave a column again and print name1. Skip a column again and print name2. That is what you're seeing here. Okay, so you see in between 5 and 4, there is a space. Okay, after it printed 4.09, it left a space again and it printed the whole text, you are welcome. It left a space again and printed, it left 2 columns and printed Martin, and left 1 space again and also printed what? It left a space here, 2 spaces rather, 2 columns, and printed Martin. It left 1 column and printed Izu. Okay, so that is the essence of this comma. Okay, the comma is for all these arguments 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to be printed on one line, on one row on the screen. This is a row on the screen. You just have to imagine it. This is a row on the screen. Okay, now if we do something like this, okay, if we do something like this, I take this one down here and I say print. Okay, I put this and I bring this down. Sorry, copy this, bring it down. Okay, copy this and I take it here. Now we discover that we have two print statements. It's going to, this will print on this particular, this will print on the first line, first row. This will print on another line. Okay, so let's save and run the program and let's see what we have. Sorry, save F5. Okay, so can we see this now? 5. Now this print statement now is printed on another line, another row, as it were. So the essence of the comma is to print what? Is to print on the same line on the screen, but one column should be skipped. Okay, so in a nutshell, instead of printing 1, 2, 3, 4 separately, that's having 4 print statements, okay, for instance, having 4 print statements like this, where you print num1, you print num2, okay, then you print num2, you print say print again, you put your single quotes, you are welcome, okay, then name 1, okay, so instead of having it this way, okay, now you discover that we are printing num1, we are printing num2, we are printing you're welcome, we are outputting num1, we are also outputting name1 and name2. Okay, so it's going to be this on one line, this on another line, this on another line, this on another line, this on another line, and you're wasting space, as it were. Okay, so you discover now we have 5, we have 4 point this, we have you're welcome, we have Martin, we have this. Okay, there is another way, which is the way we look at it, by introducing what is called comma. Okay, that comma will enable num2, then I have you are welcome, then I introduce a comma again, I have name 1, I have also name 2. Okay, so I'm still going to save this and run it the way it is. So we now have this like it is up here, 5, 4 point this on separate lines. This is one line or one row, this is another row, this is another row, this is another row, this is another row, this is this. Okay, that's it. Now we have succeeded with this to print the whole of this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, to print it on one line or on one particular row. Are we together? So there are instances where you need to use this pattern. There are instances where you need to use this pattern in outputting whatever you want to output on your desktop or your monitor, as the case may be. Having known this, there are other complex things that you can do on this print statement, but let's leave it at this level. This is the basics. So having known how to output a result on the desktop, the next thing you need to learn in the programming language, okay, is the input statement, how to receive an input from the user. Okay, now receiving input from the user can come in your programming development or design. You can supply a value at runtime, you can get a value at design time. Now what do I mean by that? Now I'm designing this program. I have supplied this value 5 at design time. I have supplied this value 4.09 at design time. I've also supplied this string value at design time. Okay, so we have two of it. Is either you supply the value at design time or you supply the value at runtime. Now at runtime, it's when you are going to prompt the user that the user should enter a value or should enter a string, as the case may be. So that's an input statement, okay, that you need to use to get or extract a value from the user when the program is on execution. So the next thing is to know how to use or receive an input data from the user when you are learning how to program. Okay, so the programming language that you're learning. So the input statement, for you to be able to receive an input at runtime, there is a function, an inbuilt function that Python has designed for a programmer to use to extract or receive an input, and the syntax is simply this. The syntax for that is variable name will be assigned this function inputs, open and close brackets, open and close bracket. That is now with an argument usually in, but this is the syntax. Okay, so I have an example here which I can easily put. So I have here val1. Okay, val1, if you look, I told you about identifiers, and when you're creating identifiers, they should tell the kind of value or inputs value that they are receiving at the end of the. So you keep everything in context. Your program should be readable and understandable, and if you come back later, you should not find confusion. Even you, the programmer, should not be confused. So your names should be as close as possible, your identifiers rather, or variables. Your variable name should be close as possible to tell the kind of value it's going to whole. Okay, so I have an example here. Val1 is assigned the input statement. Okay, this is the input statement function in Python. Okay, now it takes an argument. Okay, a text argument here. It displays, it has the ability for it to also display a string. Enter the first value or enter any value as the case may be. Let's go to our programming language on the Python and look at it. So I'll just copy this and paste here. So permit me to do this. Okay, so this value here, okay, this value here, this val1, it's telling, I used val1 because I want the user at runtime to enter a value. Okay, now that value should be either integer or float, as the case may be. That's why I call it val1. Note this critically in this input statement. Whatever your Python interpreter input statement receives from the keyboard, which is the basic input medium, it is going to treat it as a string. That is going to treat it like this name. If you input 5, this value 5, the 5 will be treated as a string. Okay, it is left for you, the programmer, to convert this 5 from string to what? Type integer. I'll say this again. The input statement or input function in Python, whatever it receives from the keyboard, especially if it's a value 5 or any value at all from 0 to 9, it's going to receive it as a string character. In this format, it's going to receive it as, for instance, it's going to receive it as, we'll look at it, we're going to output it, it's going to receive it as val1, okay, will be assigned 5. This is exactly how the input statement would receive your value. Now, you could see that 5 is in quotes, and whatever is in quotes is likened to be what? A string. If you look at this explanation here, xtr, which is the prefix for string. Okay, so the object is seen as a string. Now it is left for you to convert it to an integer. Are we together? So let's run this program and let's print. Let's print val1. Okay. Is of type. Okay, we put a comma there. Is of type, then we use the type function. Okay, we put val1. So I want us to confirm what I'm saying here. Okay, so I'm going to send the whole of this out. I'm going to delete it because we don't need it again. So I'll save this and I'll run it. Let's see what data type is this identifier or variable is. whether it's an integer or is a float or is a string, as the case may be. This print statement here will tell us what it's all about. Okay, so I have the prompt, enter the first value, and I type 5. Okay, I press enter. It is required of me to press enter on my keyboard. Now, what do we have here? 5 is of type what? String. So whatever the input statement receives, it treats it as what? Strings. Now, it behoves you, the programmer, if it's an integer you're expecting the user to input, as you have specified here, okay, a value as you have specified here, let's say integer value. Let's put integer value. Let's run the program again. So enter the first integer value. Now, irrespective of this word integer, you type 5, the interpreter sees this 5 that you type as a string and not an integer. Okay, so we can now see that 5 is of type what? str, which is string. Now, you will not be able to do this, to say num 3 is assigned 6, and you say you want to output results. It's going to throw an error. You want to output results by saying num 3 plus val 1. Let's see what the result will be. Okay, so we want to add two numbers. That's what it means. 6 is an integer, val 1 is a string. So let's see what the result would be at the end of the day. Oh, sorry. Okay, so we take off this and we just say results. Okay, so let's see what we'll have there, what the result will be. Say enter a value. I enter the value 5 and I press enter. What do we have here? There is an error. Okay, an unexpected operand typed for the operator plus int and what? String. So it is critical for you to know that whatever you receive through this input statement, if it's an integer, the input statement receives it to the interpreter as a string. So it behoves you to convert that string to data type, either integer or float, as the case may be. If you remember one of the exercises that we looked at. So having done this, having established this val, now you need to do what is called casting. Okay, casting is forcing an identifier to take the attributes of another data type, an identifier of a different data type, to take on the attributes or change its attributes to another data type. That's what casting is all about. Okay, so in order to accomplish that, we will say we will include this word here, floats. Okay, and move this value, this val 1. Okay, so this at the end of the day will give us 5 plus 6 will give us what? 11. Now this will force, this float function here, its float function cast, which is inbuilt, will force val 1 to change its data type of string to what? Float, so that the content of val 1 will now be added to the content with the content of num3, and the result will be assigned to the final summation will be assigned to the variable result. However, you can also, since we are dealing with integer, we are not dealing with float, so we will not use float here. We are going to use int. Okay, so it's still the same explanation. If this were 6.0, then we would have used float, but since we are dealing with num1, which is integer 5, then num3, which is integer 6, so we have to use the int keyword to cast on val1, and let's see what the result will be. Our result will give us 11. Say enter an integer value, then I type 5, I press enter. Okay, so we can now see that the result here is what? 11. So it is critical in Python, in Anaconda 3 Python, using Spider IDE, it's critical for you to note that every input statement, whatever the user imputes, will be treated as a string. So if the user imputes an integer or a floating value, you have to what? Convert. You have to cast that value to take the attributes of what? A float or an integer. This is very critical. So having known how to retrieve value from the user at runtime, because what we just did at runtime, we discover we already had num1 assigned a value at design time, then we have val1 that is assigned a value at runtime. Okay, at runtime we discovered here now that val1 at design time, val1 had nothing, but at runtime val1 took the value, the string value 5, and was what? There was a casting done on val1, then that the content of val1, which is now integer value, was added with the content of num2, and the summation was assigned to the variable of type integer result, and we now output the content of result, which is what? 11. 6 plus 5 will give us what? 11. Are we together? Okay, so at this point, having known how to use the input statement and the output statement, we'll look at other features in Python, like arithmetic operators. We'll look at decision control structure in Python in the next video, because the time is almost gone.